Morning, everyone. This is the January 12th meeting of the Planning, Resource, and Development Committee. It looks like we have everyone except Diane Morehouse. Diane has asked to be excused for today's meeting. Otherwise, I think all the committee members are here and the county board chair also. So we have a quorum. Approval of the minutes for December 22nd. Everyone have a chance to read them? Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you,
Supervisor
Mr.
Bjork.
Bjork. Is there a second?
Supervisor Kinnear will second it.
Second, thank you. Any further discussion? Questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Minutes are approved. Public comment. As I understand it, we did have one written public comment prepared for us. Can you put that up, Tom? Okay.
So this was received by email from Terry Nichols on January 5th, 2021 at 12:10 p.m. And I will let you read that, Chair Quinn.
Sure. We usually read written comments into so the live feed can see them. Dear Mr. Quinn, as chair of the PR&D committee, I'm submitting public comments below. In the last year, I have witnessed an event that concerns me. It relates to farm leases or permissions. Dan Prestabach related this to me in past meeting briefly pertaining to the county getting information on the use of farmland. If one is a retired farmer and leases land to an active farmer for crops or other activities, does the county have the right to look at the lease or rent agreements and future uses of the leased or rented land? If a CAFO leases or rents land and spreads liquid manure on that land that previously hadn't been used for crop use or pasture, what are the ramifications related to existing residential housing adjacent or nearby? My understanding is that expanding any CAFO results in a nutrient management plan. Well, I lost track of update. In some sense, it reminds me of the proposed sand mine in Howard Township, Chippewa County. County Road A is the only dividing line between the town of Colfax and the town of Howard. Residents in the town of Colfax were extremely worried about the investments they made in their homes, along with the possibility of contaminated groundwater. Incidentally, the town of Howard turned down zoning in the township, creating a free-for-all for sand mining companies. My question to the committee is spreading liquid manure adjacent to existing residential housing a public safety issue? Should water testing be mandatory before this activity takes place if there are any creeks adjacent to this leased land or the retired farmer's existing well that is adjacent to the leased or rented land? With new residential housing construction, I'm sure the well driller has to test the water for the state. Can this data be sent to the county for the data evaluation purposes? I witnessed the construction of 2 new homes in my neighborhood this past year and the logging of 2 lots in the subdivision next to me where the new homes were built. I suspect new construction in the coming spring. Does the county actively monitor the CAFOs in the spring and fall when the CAFOs empty their manure pits? The DNR told me that most CAFOs are self-regulating. I thank the committee for the time. Terry Nichols, Town of Colfax. Thank you very much, Terry, for those comments. It's rather than trying to answer them without Dan or our newly hired Conservation Division Director here, let's put them into our in folder, and we will address them at a future meeting if that's acceptable to the committee. Okay. We have no public hearing today. I would like to just at this point suggest that we don't have, I think we have a fairly manageable agenda today, but in view of staff who are on the call that have items later in the agenda. I would suggest, so that Barbara, for example, doesn't have to sit here until our very end, that we move, that we move number 8, review of the tax foreclosed property sales, up to after the Environmental Services Department reports, 6B. So after 6B, we would do item 8, and that would get staff that need to do other things onto their work. Is that acceptable to the committee? Okay, I see no objection. So we'll move ahead, then we'll staff reports. We'll go through them, and if just on the screen, you've all had a chance to read them. And then if there are any questions, we can ask them. So starting with the Dunn County Register of Deeds. Are there any questions to Heather about the report?
Just a question to make sure about the accounting thing.
Sure.
The 8896, is that money that goes back into the general fund for next year?
That's my understanding. Chairman Bartlett, is it your understanding? Unspent division department funds go back in general fund?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what happens.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Environmental Services. Any questions? I don't see any. Planning and zoning. Any questions? Okay. Solid waste and recycling. Morgan, you've been very busy.
Lots of invoicing to get out.
Yeah, really. That financial report. Okay. Any questions? And again, maybe the same question Mr. Supervisor Kinnear asked at the very end of your financial report. You have funds left over. Those funds, when we did our budgeting, I think the understanding was those funds would go back to the general fund to support operations going forward. And they're substantial, so big help.
Well, they would actually go back into the solid waste fund because that's a little different.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, I can clarify a little bit. Any funds left over after our operations fully cease in 21 will go back, because we had borrowed from the general fund to support the latter half of the 2020 program.
Right, that's right. That's right.
Right.
Remember that now. Okay. Any other questions of Morgan? All right. Then what's next, Tom? Is there?
That would conclude the reports.
Okay.
Typically land and water would be on here, but with Dan's departure,
Yeah.
we don't have one for this month.
And let me just, in lieu of that, just confirm to the committee that at our last meeting we did interview 2 finalists for the director position, and Chase Cummings from Pepin County has accepted that position. So Chase will be starting, I think, on December 28th, right after our next meeting, which is the time he had to give to his current employer. So that was a really positive thing. I think we all felt like Chase was a very good candidate.
Tom, you said December. You said December. Did you mean January?
Yeah, I did mean January.
Thank you.
Okay. That concludes the staff report. So let's move to the bids for 2020 land sale. Barbara, you want to lead us through this?
Yes, thank you. So there were a number of properties up for sale. we're at the minimum bid stage on the properties at this point. Any properties that the minimum bid wasn't met or the committee doesn't approve will go to open bid this month. And then the Herman property will go to start minimum bid. So there's several properties. The first property, 20-04, that was the property located on County C, a trailer that had burned down. The committee previously had set the minimum bid at $25,000. Each of the adjacent neighbors bid on this property. I showed the property quite a bit, but only the neighbors bid. So there's a $33,100 bid from Mick and Jolene Sauer. And there's a $31,000 bid from Mark Buxton. And so the recommendation of our office is to accept the $33,100 bid to Mick and Jolene.
Okay, let's go through these one by one, but do it quickly. Is there a motion to accept the recommendation? Mike, Supervisor Kinnear moves.
I'll move to accept.
Supervisor Bartlett seconds.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, go ahead, Barbara.
The next property is located on County Road K. There was a lot of interest in this property. The top bid is from Shelby Fritz for $76,500. That's substantially above any of the other bids. Shelby Fritz did submit a short few sentences to the committee that she wanted to be shared. She writes quickly, "I'm very excited for this opportunity as a 2012 nominee graduate and growing up just across the field. Owning this property would be a dream. There's so much potential in this property to not only raise my horses, goats, and chickens, but my daughter too. Ready to roll up my sleeves. Thank you for your time and consideration." Given the bid of $76,500 is the highest, that is the recommendation of the department.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept that recommendation?
Move approval.
Jim Anderson
Second.
moves approval. Mike Kinnear seconds. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay.
The next property was a property located in Boyceville at 466 Main Street. It is a house with a separated garage with, and the minimum bid was $25,000. Richard Sutliff bid $35,001 on the property. And that is the recommendation to accept Richard Sutliff's bid.
Thank you. Is there a motion to accept the recommendation?
Supervisor Bjork, like to make that motion.
And the second?
And
From
Second.
second.
Supervisor Kinnear seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Passes.
There was a garage in Boyceville on Main Street. The minimum bid for the garage was set at $5,000. Sean Stadel bid $6,000, and that is the recommendation from the department to accept Mr. Stadel's bid.
Move approval.
Supervisor Anderson moves. Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
Supervisor Bjork seconds. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, it carries. You did a really good job. You got a second career, a side career in your hands here, Barbara. That's great. Get property off the tax roll, and we actually regain some income.
Yes.
Okay.
So one, just in case people ask, there's one property that's going to be going to open bid that has a house on it, just so you know. But
Okay.
I will bid you would do.
All right. Thank you. Let's go up to the item C, alternative dwelling units. Mr. Coulson, you want to?
Is my microphone on?
It is.
It may go out, so if it does, I'll have to just unplug everything and restart. But it only takes a couple seconds to unplug it. So somebody just let me know if you can't hear me. This one, Mr. Chair, I've been
Out.
Bob, your microphone went out.
Is that better now?
Yes.
Okay. He's asking if we couldn't just move this to the next meeting. He has some other research that he'd like to be able to provide to the committee. So I guess I'd like to know if the committee would want to go through this or wait and push it forward to next meeting.
There was a lot of really good information in here. Does anyone want to have further discussion today, or is it okay if we just put off further discussion until the next meeting? Any objections to that? Let's do that then, Bob. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Material, I thought.
All right, so I will bring that back next time.
Okay. Wow, you want to go on to your item 6D,
Sure.
the consultant sanitation?
Yeah, so as you know, we ran into kind of a buzzsaw last season with the number of inspections, and so we had to make a shift where I picked up zoning inspections so that staff could get at Michelle could get at the sanitation inspections, and we brought this to the committee's attention and felt that this is probably not a workable solution going forward, at least at least from the standpoint of getting other work done, speaking for myself. And so got permission to send out a request for proposals, and I worked with administration, John McLaughlin, and we sent out an RFQ, and that is in your packet. I don't need to go through that unless the committee wants to go through that. We did receive, and so we sent out to the normal places where the county sends these to, and I also talked to 3 of the local engineering firms, Cedar Corporation, Ayers Associates, and SEH, because all 3 of those have environmental engineers, and they all, at least on the phone, wanted me to send them the RFQ. In the end, we received one quote coming back, and that was from Cedar Corporation. And so, so if we could go down to there we go. So this is what we got from Cedar Corporation. They will be gearing up between now and May to have a certified inspector. They will work for the county at a rate of $93 an hour, and with 57 cents per mile for the use of their vehicle if we use their vehicle. I currently have this over to council, drafting a contract to engage Cedar Corporation in these services. I just wanted to bring it to the committee's attention so that you know that where we're headed. Just so you know, we are planning to use Cedar Corporation only when needed on this stuff, but we do want to give them enough work that we can do this as a test run to see if this is something that is going to work for the division and for the county. So, so they won't be the only inspector, and at least in the beginning, we will the first couple of inspections. I will send my staff, Michelle, out with Cedar Corporation's inspector to make sure that they understand, our methodology, our way of doing work, the way that our plumbers are used to seeing our work done, so that we can have a seamless transition or introducing this person into the workflow as possible. So I think that's pretty much the extent of what I wanted to share. If there's questions, I'll certainly entertain them.
Any questions?
One question, please. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Bob, are you still looking to fill any positions in your office? Or is that put on hold to see how this works out?
Well, the new budget cycle is coming up. There wasn't one in this year's budget cycle, so there wasn't a request. So no, there is no position request coming this year. But I will be asking for one in the next budget cycle, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. This is exactly what we were looking for, and what you had indicated you would put together. So much appreciated.
I think it'll work for a temporary, but maybe even a long time solution. But I will be making a report to the committee as to how we're doing with this. So once we get into it.
Okay. Thank you. Then the next item is still with you, scanning of the planning and zoning files.
Yes, and so as you recall, there was a contingency fund request that this committee supported. We went out, worked with IT, went out to bids. We had two bidders to scan and index our files so that going forward that we will be able to offer them through a portal to those people that can have access to the portal, but also for staff that we would have all of our files available electronically. And this became apparent as I spoke, because of COVID, staff working at home, and not all of those files were accessible. So guess who was the gopher to get all that information and send it out? And it's time consuming to say the least. And so I'm grateful that the committee supported the contingency fund request. We did. U.S. Imaging came in with a low quote. They will be, and it's in there somewhere. I don't have the number in front of me, but it was 36 or something. But I asked for a little bit extra just in case. At the end of this month, I believe it's the 26th. They will be coming to box up our files and take them away. They are anticipating that they may be gone for upwards around 6 months. During that time, there is an agreement as part of the contract that if we need documents from those files, that we provide them, where the file is and what we need. They will scan those and email them back to us. They have two kind of fees for that. One fee is if we need it ASAP, and so we can call over and say, we just got a call. There's a plumber with the backhoe. They need to know where this is. Find it in this file. They will find those and send it to us so that we don't have a disruption in service for our community. But then also on a daily basis, if we know that there are some that aren't emergencies, that we can collect those, send them over, and they will send them to us the next day at a different fee. We did craft a letter that went out to the plumbing community explaining, what's going to be happening, and we're asking the plumbing community to, when they call in and need some of these documents, that they could prioritize them for us. One if it's immediate, if it's something that they need right now, and the other if it's just timely, and we could get that to them not the same day. So again, we'll see how this works out. I'm guessing there'll be a few wrinkles in the beginning, but it shouldn't be much different than we're doing right now, where staff emails me, I go find it, scan it, and send it back out. But there may just be a little bit more time lag, but I don't expect that we'll be missing any of the emergency ones that the plumbing community needs. So that's where we're at with that project. Questions?
Questions, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So what kind of charge will be applied to the public for using this service? Any idea?
Well, you mean once they're scanned, or
right?
Well, there will be no charge once they're scanned. We would just put these. We have this software GCS, and in GCS, we'd work with those consultants and open up a portal that we could offer to the plumbers, to the real estate agents, to the general public, and And there would be some restrictions on just how far they could navigate, but they could get in and see those files. And so for example, Mr. Bjork, if you had requested, sent in for a permit, a zoning permit, and you were wondering just where things were, you would be able to go in and see the status of that permit, or if the permit was approved, you could actually see those documents and see what was happening. So there'll be no fee to the public. It's public records. We're just making them available rather than having to make paper copies for people.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have
Supervisor Anderson.
I have a comment. Bob, I'm well aware of what you're doing and commend you for this. It's a huge task. I just went through this a little bit with the Dunn County Economic Development and trying to get rid of and update files as we moved. And so I commend you. I think this is great. The workload is far beyond what anybody can imagine. And doing this, moving it to converting everything to electronic format is absolutely great. My comment to you is good job, Bob. I think it's just a great new workable plan, and I'm just impressed and want to thank you.
Well, thank you, Supervisor Anderson, but I do want to just extend their gratitude back to the committee for supporting this project, and just let you know that money hasn't been spent. It was in last year's budget. So, and I just received notification from Mr. Stride that we'll be looking for carry forward. So you could expect to see that I'll be asking for this money to be carried forward.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Anyone else?
And then the last one I have is this maintenance, sanitation maintenance records data entry. And as you recall, there's a stack we have on Janet's desk up in the front there. That is probably, I don't know, 18 inches, 24 inches tall, and probably as 24 inches deep. And so there's a lot of records in there, or a lot of sanitation records that need to get inputted into the system. We currently don't have the man hours to do that. And before we went and said, well, let's go and hire somebody. And as you recall, I did get some quotes for maybe temp services. But before we go down that path, Mr. Miller suggested that maybe we look internally to see if we couldn't get some or all of this work done internally. I had a discussion with Dan Prestabach before he left, and Dan was open to the idea of some of his staff helping out, but he was clear, at least, that may be a short-term commitment. As you realize, this work comes in. We get stuff in the mail weekly, and this is ongoing. And so there isn't a start and an end to this project. This project is just ongoing. There's data entry that needs to be done, and there's also needs to be sorting and getting stuff ready for the next mailing. And then there also needs to be some review of what came in, and then sending notices out to those that didn't comply, so that we can keep our records straight. So Dan was open to maybe a 6-month trial for this. And then before he left, he thought, well, he didn't want to commit his staff, because he was leaving, for Chase, the new guy coming in. And so what we agreed to do is to bring one of his staff members on, get them on board, get them access to our software, train them on, which was very little, it's very straightforward, but train them on the information that we need out of these documents and how to get it into our system. And to do 8 hours of that. And so we were thinking that, Dan was thinking that his staff would work on it, 8 hours a week, that we wouldn't necessarily be 8 hours a day. And we're fine with that. This stuff is not, at least for us, it's not time sensitive. We do want to get it in. I think there's some valuable information that that would help the committee with some of the work that they're doing in terms of water quality, certainly in land conservation. You know, they're the people that are working with you on those projects. And so we're working, you know, to see 8 hours. And so I can understand about how much work we can really get done. So I could go back and if I need to tweak the estimate of time that's needed to at least data entry portion of this. Once Chase gets on board and gets his feet planted, I will have a discussion with him and bring him up to speed and to see what his appetite is for this, and then I'll report that back to the committee.
That sounds good to me. Anyone have any questions? Good to hear we'll be moving on this. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's brings us to 6G, review of the draft land division ordinance. If you remember, we had so we put this off, we postponed the public hearing on this in order to have further discussion within committee. Tom, are you going to lead this?
Sure, I'll lead it. Corp Counsel here is here as well. So between Nick and I, we will address the changes that we have made. And Nick, if you have something to add as I'm going through this, feel free to step in. So what Nick and I did is we went through this. The additions are underlined in blue text, and the deletions are going to be in red and have strike throughs. So you all should have had this in your packet. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at the changes we are making. There are a whole host of general changes. Water course is made one word throughout the document. Stormwater, drainage ways are made 2 words throughout. There were places where hyphens were missing. We added those. Chapter, we made to lowercase throughout. And then there were some changes in the table of contents, some corrections for consistency with the section headings. So I'm going to start with the sections. We're just going to go through these one by one. This should not take very long, but there are some sections where we need to spend a little more time. We are going to come back to these density maps here later. So what I'm going to do is we'll just start from the top. Section 16.03. There were some punctuation errors in lines 7, 8, 9, and 10. Basically semicolon use. Very minor, no substantive change there. Contiguous tract. We made some changes here. Okay. So we added in under identical ownership okay, we're getting some feedback from, I believe it's Supervisor Kinnear. Anyway, I would just ask or remind everybody to please mute yourself. So we added in as of the date of the adoption of this ordinance, which is important. We need a snapshot in time. And then we changed the lots and outlots that are in recorded plats, basically, or certified survey maps. So I'll just read it. Each lot or outlot within a recorded plat or CSM existing on the date of the adoption of this ordinance shall be considered as its own contiguous tract. And this morning, I'm trying to think of an analogy to this that maybe would make more sense to everybody. It makes sense to me. Plats and CSMs, when they are recorded, they create lots, they create legal parcels, and they get a new PIN number assigned to them. That is the way you create a new parcel. You record a certified survey map or a plat. The day those maps are recorded, those parcels legally exist. So in my mind, I guess the analogy I'll use is a bank account, right? We all have bank accounts. Let's say that I have $10,000 in my checking account, and then I decide I'm going to move $2,000 into my savings account, okay? So you see the analogy here. I've got a contiguous tract. Now I'm going to divide a piece of that out and create a certified survey map. So I move $2,000 out of my checking account in my savings. I'm leaving $8,000 in my checking account. Well, later on down the road, I find out that I no longer qualify for, just bear with me here. I no longer find out that I no longer qualify for free checking because I haven't maintained a $10,000 balance in that account. The argument I would try and make to my lender is that, well, hey, I have $10,000, just $2,000 is in this other account. That isn't going to fly. I mean, both accounts are in my name, but they are separate, and I can't take the money in one and say, well, I have 10,000 total. Each one is looked at separately. So I hope that analogy makes sense. It becomes important when we're dealing with the remnant parcels. And I guess in my mind, if somebody is dividing land off as a separate parcel, we should not be lumping that in to their whole contiguous tract. It defeats the purpose. They divided it for some reason, and now to make the argument that, well, we're going to lump that back in with where we started, just isn't a good practice or policy. So are there any questions on this? If not, I'm going to move on.
Questions? Okay.
Okay, then we'll move down into, just bear with me, I'm trying to stay with, I have several documents here in front of me. So 16.04, what we did is county plat, in the land classification section, I believe it's 16.08, we had definitional verbiage there, which we have since moved up into the definition section here. So creation of 5 or more lots from a contiguous tract of which no more than 4 lots are 1.5 acres or less in area, either by a division or by successive divisions within a 5-year period. So that was a change there. Double frontage lots, we deleted this. After doing a word search, we realized that nowhere in this document do we use the word double frontage lots. So that can be deleted. Line 110. Lot. What we did is we made changes here to simplify the definition. We got looking at this, and really a lot is any parcel of land legally created by plat or certified survey map. Doesn't matter what you're using it for, what type of structures are going on it. The fact that it's created by plat or CSM defines it as a lot. So we just thought we keep it very simple. Any questions on that? Line 124, we realized that there was a word missing, so we just added the word section. And again, a lot of these are just very minor in detail. Line 153, just some rewording here to simplify and make the definition more clear. Same thing with line 155. Move down to line 189. Contiguous area of land. We just deleted the end of that sentence to simplify the language. Line 212. The following are exempt from the requirements of this chapter. So this whole section, we made some revisions to clarify the divisions exempt. We also, so you can read these in blue. I'm not going to go through all those. It's basically saying the same thing, just slightly differently. A major change we did make, though, is, and this change stemmed from some conversations I had with a private surveyor who had concerns about the ordinance. So what we did is we removed section C, 1, 2, and 3. And this again this section deals with the conveyances between adjoining landowners. We removed these sections to simplify administration of the ordinance, reduce costs to the public, and remove language that may exceed our authority to regulate this section of state statute. It is an area of statute that counties have struggled with over the years, how to regulate. The key thing we're taking from this section of statute is conveyances of land are exempt from a local subdivision review or regulation if the following conditions are met. You can't reduce the minimum or reduce the parcel. The resulting parcels can't be reduced below a minimum lot size required by a local ordinance. And number 2 is no new additional lots are being created. So we thought, why not just deal with this section by making it very clear what is going to constitute a new lot. So we added, this sentence here is very important in my mind. For the purpose of this subsection, any fractional part of a lot or outlot intended to be conveyed to an adjoining landowner is considered to be an additional lot. So if I own 40 acres and Tom Quinn wants to sell me, the west 10 feet of his 40, we can do that. We're not creating any new lots. But if Tom Quinn has a 5-acre CSM lot and he wants to convey a 25-foot strip off the west side of that to me, that is going to require a certified survey map, because he is dividing part of a surveyed lot that's already on record. So we feel this is a efficient way to deal with this section, while I guess keeping us in check as far as our authority of the county to regulate this section of statute. So any questions? This is, I wouldn't say a major change, but it's a change, a notable change to the ordinance. Any questions on that?
Well, you give us an example of that, Tom. Why, where, and how would that be applied in a real life situation?
You mean if we left the items in red?
No, if we now we're changing it.
Changing it. Well, it basically, it's going to fall on my plate. A landowner calls me up and says, Tom, this is what I want to do. I have some land. I want to convey it to my neighbor. I'm going to have to take a look at this, okay, and see, number one, do we have a conveyance between adjoiners? And then number two is the part that's being, the subject piece that's being conveyed, is that part of an existing certified survey, part of a lot of an existing certified survey map or a plat. And if it is, then the landowner needs to be made aware that, hey, you are going to be required to do a certified survey map on this.
Okay.
Versus what we had in here in red, it would, involve an application. It would involve, it would create more, result in more staff time. It would require it would place conditions on the transfer of that property as far as their deeds and other things. Not saying we can't do that, and some would argue maybe that is a good idea, but the more we looked at it, it creates another layer of administration to the ordinance. Somebody's going to have to, go through these things, possibly being reimbursed for that time, and it's going to result in costs for the landowners. Right now we do not have this in the ordinance, and I feel like it's being handled well. Obviously, things are going to slip through the cracks, and when they do, I get notified. I mean, every year I get, several of these come through. The real property lister's office catches them, and I have to follow up. So things are going to happen, but we just feel that right now we have no language in our current ordinance addressing this very well. By adding these blue portions here, I think it's certainly going to improve our ordinance and provide a way for staff to deal with these. It's black and white now, at least it's in the ordinance. Any fractional part of a lot or an outlot is going to be considered an additional lot, and therefore a certified survey map will be required. So,
and two of the 2 and 3 are more a matter of, we both felt they were desirable, but we began to question whether or not the county actually has authority to regulate to this degree. I think they're excellent provisions. I'm just not sure that we can do it. And they're both additional administrative activities that the surveyor would have to undergo. Number 2, so it says if you have any unpaid taxes or delinquent taxes on either parcel, you can't do this. State law does not impose that kind of regulation. In fact, state law really goes out of the way to make this an easy thing to accomplish with very little involvement, other than just making sure that both of the adjoining landowners are who they say they are, and that there's going to be no new parcel created by it. And so we felt this could possibly exceed our authority to regulate. And then number 3 is just requiring both the, the western parcel and the eastern parcel, where, 10-foot additional is going to be conveyed from one to the other, requiring that they both be within the same zoning district, creates an additional administrative activity. Again, we're not sure that the county can regulate it, and because it's directly linked to zoning, it would create a requirement for zoned townships that does not exist for unzoned townships, and so it would result in a differential application. So that's the reason that we are recommending elimination of all 3 of these, what Tom said, and then these 2.
Chairman Quinn, can comment?
Sure. Your microphone's not working, Bob.
It is or it's not? Is that a yes? Tom Carlson?
Bob, your microphone it's working, but it's very faint. Can hardly hear you.
All right, let's see if that helped again now.
That's better.
Yeah, I don't know what's with this darn thing, but it goes out. So Tom, this thing on line 220, fractional part of a lot or outlot intended to be conveyed to adjoining area is considered to be an additional lot. Well, how does that impact? We have this. We were just working with a landowner in terms of where his parcel is divided by a highway, and there's a little sliver created on the north side of the road that he can't use, but his neighbor could, and subsequently on the neighbor's parcel, there's a small portion created when the road goes through it. Does this affect that kind of situation where they want to transfer land, to adjoiners?
No, in that case, it doesn't, unless one of the landowners already had a certified survey map. If they currently own a CSM and they want to deed a little sliver to the neighbor, it is going to require a new certified survey map because they're creating a new lot.
All right.
But if it's just unplatted lands, a full 40, a road is running through it, and there's a 0.3 of an acre on one side of the road, they can certainly deed that to the neighbor.
Great.
without a new CSM.
Super. Great.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on this section, conveyances between adjoiners? If hearing none, I'm going to move on to line 253. Some deletions here just to simplify. We're going to move down to line 255. We had a wrong statutory reference, just a typo in there, so we corrected that. Line 264, classification of land divisions. I am going to come back to this because this is what I consider to be our big ticket item for today, and this could result in some discussion. So if there's no heartburn, I'm going to just move on, but I will come back to this because it does warrant considerable discussion, I feel. County plats, you may remember we removed the definition. This definitional sentence here was pulled up to the beginning under the definition. So that section has just been reduced in size, but nothing has really been removed. It's just been relocated. Line 468. So we had some lettering here, issues that we had to re-letter. So just some things in there. Line 470. This came to my mind. You may remember it came before the committee here a month ago, maybe a month and a half, a request for a variance. Landowner wanted to create a lot in a floodplain in the town of Sheridan. And by having the word parcel here, so all parcels, so again, this is the regional, the information dealing with the regional floodplain. We had initially all parcels shall contain a minimum of 10,000 square feet. Well, this creates a problem when somebody wants to create an outlot. Outlot can't be built upon by definition. And by changing the word parcel to newly created lots, I think allows more flexibility. So what this would do by saying all newly created lots shall contain a minimum of 10,000 square feet of contiguous land. Somebody wants to come in and create a non-buildable parcel by CSM in a floodplain, they can do this without they don't need to comply with this 10,000 square foot requirement. So it makes sense in my mind. Any questions on that? We're only applying this requirement to newly created lots. It will not apply to an outlot, which I think is very important.
That makes sense.
Okay. Moving down to line 524. So this was all relettering here. 524, again, we had some renumbering. So that affects these lines right here that you can see. And then we move down to line 40, some collateral damage, so to speak. So the renumbering here resulted in some renumbering down here. 541, just some changes there for clarification, make things easier to read. Same with line 689. So again, a lot of these are just minor things. We do have an opportunity now to change these, so why not do it, right? Line 689, again, newly created lots. We're talking about floodplain boundaries again. So line 693, we made some changes to clarify, basically deed references, makes it easier to understand. We added the date that it was signed on line 698. Line 709, just a change here to clarify. Line 717, correction of a grammatical error. Line 759, additions to clarify. Line 799 was a deletion. Line 815 was a correction of a spelling error. Line 844, I believe, was another spelling error. Yeah, actually punctuation should be the high water elevation. 925 was some numbering. Or actually 925 was an addition. So when an outlot is created for this purpose, a note shall be placed. So basically, if somebody's creating an outlot for private ownership, we want a note on the map clearly stating the ownership and interest in the outlot, which I think is very important. It's just something we overlooked or missed. Line 962 is renumbering. We had 2 number 6s in here, so it's just some duplicate numbering that we had to take care of. And then line 990, just some changes to clarify. And the last one was line 1194. So again, most of these are very minor. 1194. Same thing here, just a correction for a grammatical error. So now I want to go back to the item I skipped over, and that is section 16.08. Let me get back up there. And this is something that I guess caught my eye after we had been through several rounds of discussion with the committee's classification of land divisions. So right now, parcel density is currently being managed in zone townships. Does the committee want to manage parcel density in the unzoned townships? And I'm going to get into some examples here, okay? So if the committee wants to manage parcel density in the zone townships, they have 2 options that I see as viable, options A and B. And if they don't, then we have an option C. So here is option A. This is one option. I'm not going to say what's best. That's up to the committee on what they feel should be the county's policy. But option A is density management by number of splits per 40 over time. So I'll just read this. Creation of a lot smaller than 20 acres from a contiguous tract shall require a CSM, maximum of 4 lots smaller than 20 acres from each quarter or government lot within that contiguous tract may be created within a 5-year period. Additional lots must be created by county plat or state plat. Any lot created that is located in multiple quarters or government lots shall be counted against the quarter or government lot in which the greater area of the created lot lies. CSM shall be prepared, so I won't do the rest of that. So I'm going to go up to option A, and I have a document here. Let's see, page 40. So option A is being illustrated here on this document. One thing I want to get out in the open right away is, as I was preparing this and going through things, I noticed somebody had cut the words Trump into the field over here. And I just want to get that out in the open that this is in no way a support or denial of any political campaign, or it has nothing to do with politics. I had all this work done and I noticed that and I thought, oh my goodness, I can't start over. I don't want to move to another part of the county. And I guess in some senses, it's kind of a weird coincidence that of all the areas I could have picked in the county, this happens to show up in the field. So I just want to get that out, that in no way is this a political discussion or have anything to do with politics. So in case anybody caught that in the packet. So section 16.08, what I attempted to do is lay out this option A. So I'm a landowner, okay, and I have 2 40-acre parcels. So my contiguous tract is 80 acres. I have a road on the north side, a road on the east side, and a road on the south side. Just for the sake of argument, I labeled this area right in here as having very steep slopes. Let's just say they're over 20% slopes. And then there's a wetland in this area, okay, for the sake of our discussion. So if we look at option A, number of splits per 40 over time, which is what we have currently proposed in our draft. So that results in 4 lots per 40 in a 5-year period. The number of parcels is limited only by our total acreage. So, you know, if I want to make these the bare minimum, I can keep chunking parcels off of here until I run out of land. Nothing is to stop me. I'm only limited by my acreage and, of course, the number of splits over time. Doing so is not consistent with the zoning ordinance. It has the potential to slowly eliminate farmland in 5-year increments. It does not allow for clustering in areas best suited for development. It results in development that could impact environmentally sensitive areas. So to illustrate, so on year 1, I need to zoom out here a little bit, but on year 1, I hire a surveyor. And by ordinance, I can do 4 lots, 1, 2, 3, 4 in yellow on the 140, and I can do 4 more lots on the other 40. By ordinance, that's allowed. I can create 8 lots on year 1, 4 lots per 40. After 5 years, 8 more lots can be created, but 4 of them have to be on each 40. So, so on year 6, once the recording date expires on these 8 lots, for each one of those certified survey maps, I come in, I call the surveyor back, I do lots 9 through 12 and lots 13 through 16. So on year 6, I end up with 16 newly created lots on this 80-acre tract. I am forced to put 8 of them on 140 and 8 on the other because I can't put them all on 140 if the ordinance doesn't allow that. I can, but I would have to wait. You know, in time I could do that. But if my goal, let's just say I, Tom Carlson, am a developer, and my goal is to maximize my profit. I'm certainly not going to wait and develop the best property if I have, you know, money as an objective. And everybody's in a different situation. You can't fault developers for wanting to develop land. My goodness, that's why they bought it. So I'm out to make money. I'm going to maximize my profit. I'm doing the 8 yellow lots, and then I'm going to come right back as soon as I'm allowed on day 1. On that 6th year, I'm going to create 8 more lots. I have 16 lots out here on year 6. And then if I wait long enough after 10 years, so on year 11, I can make 8 more lots, which are my green lots in here, lots 17 through 20. And the reason lot 17 is so large is because at some point, and my example here, remember once we get below 20 acres, the remainder also has to be surveyed into a CSM lot once I drop below 20 acres. So I'm just using this as an example. I end up with 8 more lots per 40, okay? So I end up with 24 lots there on year 11, and that's permissible under what we have in our draft ordinance. Okay, does anybody have any questions on this before I move in to the other option B, which is a density-based approach? Does everybody understand this? Because this is what we have in the draft ordinance before we came up with these options for the committee. The
Hey,
biggest,
Tom,
Yeah, Supervisor
Can you
Kinnear.
hear?
Yep.
The part where it says it's inconsistent with zoning, you know, the zoning has the density. Which one takes precedence if we kept this, for example?
so let me give you an example. So Bob Colson and I deal with this. I mean, more often than not, a landowner will come in. They're in a zone township. They own 40 acres and it's under general ag zoning. So we get on a conference call with this landowner. They want to create the maximum number of lots on this 40. So Bob advises them that, well, under the GA zoning district, you can, under the 8-to-1 density ratio, you can create 5 parcels on this 40-acre piece. And that's the way it is. I mean, that's zoning. If they want to do more, they would have to apply or petition for a rezone to a residential zoning district, which would allow greater density. So that landowner is told that they are allowed five residential splits for the life of that parcel. If they would come to me, let's just say Bob is on vacation. They come to me and say, Tom, I want to, create a bunch of lots in this 40. I tell them, well, you can do, if you're going to do this by certified survey map, you can do 4 lots. Right now, you'd have to wait 5 years and you can do 4 more. But I have to be careful telling them that, because even though the county land division ordinance would allow successive CSMs every 5-year period and keep creating lots, as long as they complied with minimum lot size, they are limited by zoning. So I have to qualify my statement by saying, well, this is what you can do under the county land division ordinance, but zoning is not going to allow you to do that. Once you hit your 5th lot, you need to speak with Bob or one of his staff members in his absence. So that's what I mean by it's not consistent. The subdivision ordinance does not restrict the number of lots, especially over time, whereas zoning does. So in these zone townships, they have to comply with the more restrictive ordinance, in this case, the zoning ordinance. They're only going to get 5 lots there ever for the life of the parcel.
If I could, Tom, can you still hear me?
Yes.
The other piece, Supervisor Kinnear, and for the rest of the committee that Tom talked about briefly but didn't touch on is conserving, farmland or putting.
Bob, your microphone is cut out again.
In this instance, there's 80 acres, and the landowner, if he wanted to conserve some land, the zoning ordinance would allow him to transfer the 5 from the parcel, the 80 to the south, where there is wetland and farmland, and we would allow him to consolidate or put the 10 of them on the piece of land to the north. Thereby, he could have the best of both worlds. He could keep all his farmland and still attain maximum density through our ordinance. We would allow that, and in Tom's map here, with the 4 per 5 years, you can see that there isn't an option. I mean, he is going to be taking important farmland, and in some cases even wetlands, because he doesn't have the option of consolidating or moving those lots to transferring that density or that development credit to a different parcel that he owns. So I think that's important to understand in this concept, that one of the reasons for density was to preserve open space and when we can, farmland. And in this situation, we would explain to the landowner that you could have 10 and still keep all of your farmland if you wanted, and then we'd let them go from there. So that's kind of an important piece to understand.
Yeah, thank you, Tom and Bob. Yeah, I kind of got that, but I was just curious and how you guys had to work together. This sounds like a headache if you kept this particular language in option A for both of you.
Well, it works well in the unzoned townships because obviously there is no density there to deal with, but we have to remember that our ordinance, this county land division ordinance, applies countywide, zoned or unzoned. So you're going to see how this has implications in option B for especially the unzoned townships, if we look at density. So we can certainly come back to this, and I suspect we will, but what I'd like to do is move into option B, because I think both options should really be presented, and then we have a discussion. So I'm going to jump down to option B. This is density based. I need to get back into, I want to read 1608 first, and we'll come back. So here's option B. Let me make this a little larger. So classification of land divisions. So this would be our second option. Density management by ratio as applied to the entire contiguous tract. So creation of a lot smaller than 20 acres from a contiguous tract shall require a CSM. A maximum of 4 lots smaller than 20 acres may be created within a contiguous tract in a 5-year period. Additional lots must be created by county plat or state plat. Maximum density. So this part is very important. Maximum density, and this is consistent with our county zoning ordinance in the general ag zoning district. Maximum density for contiguous tracts subject to county zoning shall meet the requirements of the Dunn County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. Maximum density for contiguous tracts not subject to county zoning. So these would be all of our unzoned townships, okay? Not subject to county zoning shall be 1 lot per 8 acres or 1 to 8, which shall be calculated by dividing the area of the contiguous tract by 8. Any fractional number resulting from the calculation, that's at least 80%, shall be rounded up to the next whole number. And then contiguous tracts existing prior to the adoption of this ordinance, which are greater than 8 and smaller than 16 acres, may be subdivided to create 1 additional lot. So that language is very consistent and harmonious with our zoning ordinance language. Okay, so now an illustrative diagram of option B. So this is our density ratio, 8 to 1. So in simple terms, for every 40 acres, you get 5 residential splits, okay? So what it does is it limits the total number of parcels that can ever be created. It is a finite number. When anybody calls the office, we do the math, and that's the number you get. If we allow so many splits per 40 in a 5-year period, we don't know how many we're going to end up after 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. It is in large part dependent on the topography of the land, access to roads, road frontage, things like that. So again, it limits the total number of parcels, 1 parcel for every 8 acres. It's consistent with the zoning ordinance. It provides flexibility for the landowner if they so choose. It allows for clustering in areas best suited for development, allows for preservation of farmland. It's equitable for all landowners. The calculation is the same. It doesn't matter if you own 80 acres or 280 acres, you divide by 8. That's the number of residential splits you're going to get. So the more land you have, the more splits you're going to get. Equitable. It allows for the protection of environmentally sensitive areas. So if we use the same example that we just had in option A, I have 80 acres of land. I come into the county environmental services department. I meet with the surveying office and zoning office. We're on the same page. Your contiguous tract is 80 acres. We do the math. You get 10 splits, Mr. Landowner. You can put those wherever you want within the boundary of this 80-acre parcel. We don't care. We're not going to force you to put them in the best areas. That's your call. But if you're environmentally minded, which I think a lot of people are, this would be an option available to you. You can do your 10 lots. You're going to put them all up here where you have road frontage in a wooded area, best suited for housing. You're going to stay away from the area with steep slopes. You're not going to impact we'll call this prime farm ground. I don't know if it is prime farm ground, but for today it is. You're not going to impact the prime farm ground. That remains undeveloped. The steep slopes remain undeveloped. And we have this wetland complex here that we are not intruding on because we're allowed some flexibility. Now, again, I want to be very clear. This isn't forcing a landowner developer to put all those in the best area. That is their choosing, but it provides them flexibility. One thing, I guess we got to look at the pros and cons. These are certainly all pros as I see them for the county. One con is, so Now we're in one of the unzoned townships, so we need to keep this in perspective. In Dunn County, we have 6 unzoned political townships. We have the town of Sand Creek, New Haven, O'Galley, Rock Creek. I got to think here, Elk Mound and Spring Brook. So we have 6 unzoned townships in the county. This is going to affect those landowners. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's just say this property right here, this 80 acres, is in the town of New Haven. Okay, unzoned. If I was a developer or a landowner, I could come in and, in theory, create 24 lots on year 11 out here on this property. If we adopt option B in our county land division ordinance, I, as a landowner in the town of New Haven, am going to have to comply with this requirement. Okay, that's going to give me 10 lots ever for my 80 acres. And if I bought this property and inherited it with the goal that, hey, this is my retirement, I'm going to maximize my profit, I'm going to sit on this until I'm 60 years old, and then I'm going to create 24 lots out here, I'm going to be sadly mistaken, because the county ordinance is not going to allow me to do that. The most I'll ever get on that 80 acres, if I do the math based on this density ratio, is 10 splits. So, and the important point is I have no mechanism available to me to create more lots. And if I was in a zone township, okay, say I was in the town of Menominee, and I was faced with this situation, I would have a mechanism. It may not work in the end, but at least I could petition before the county petition to have the land rezoned into a residential zoning district that would allow me to do 24 lots or 44 lots, whatever I wanted to do. If I'm in New Haven, I don't have that. I'm in an unzoned township. I am stuck at 10 lots. Or if I have 40 acres, I'm stuck at 5. I can never make more than 5 lots out there. Whereas if we allow the number of splits to happen per 40 in a 5-year period, I could make many more lots than what is allowed under density. So this is a major policy decision as I see it. It affects the whole county, and particularly has, I think, a great impact on the towns right now that are unzoned. It would be a huge change. So I guess we have to weigh, the pros and cons. I think I've expressed all of the pros that I can see, and then I've listed a large, negative on this, especially for the zone townships. But I don't know how else to explain it. Does everybody understand the 2 different scenarios here, density based versus number of splits? I guess they're both density if you want to look at it that way, but ways of managing the density, either number of splits over time or a true ratio. I guess I'll remind the committee that the county, adopted general ag zoning for a reason. And I think that was certainly to be in line with the county comp plan to, promote the preservation of farm ground or highly productive farmland, preserve the rural character of the countryside or of the county, and certainly to protect, or at least provide some protection for the environmentally sensitive areas. So are there any questions or any comments, I guess, Corp Counsel or Bob Colson would like to make as part of this discussion?
One question, Tom. This
Yes.
is Gary Bjork. Could that bottom 40 acres that's undeveloped, could that be split like the 20 and 20, or because that's part of the 80, it could not be split?
If you split that 20, the 20 and 20 would be allowed under our ordinance, because we have a provision that says if you can convey an equal half of a government protracted quarter section without requiring a certified survey map.
Okay.
So that 40 could be split in half.
And could that 40, that 20 acres, if the landowner to the left added that 20 acres, would that increase his density options in the future? Or is there restrictions on that 20 acres?
Well,
the way that we deal it in zoning is no, we go by the parent tract. And so we're not going to allow you to recreate and add land after the fact. And so what we do is we manage the parcel splits, the density according to the day that the ordinance was adopted. And so that we know that the maximum density in the county is going to be X, because those were the parcels that were created at the time of the ordinance. So in this example, if it was split 20 and the guy to the left surveyed it to create 40, he wouldn't have his 40 with 5 and the additional one. So we're going to limit the density to the parent tract. And so there's always going to be, regardless of how that land is split up, there's going to be 5 splits in that southern 40. Regardless of how it's split up over time, we're going to manage it to 5 non-farm splits.
But could you even split that 40, because you're only allowed those 10 splits in that 80 acres, so that 20 acres couldn't even be split then, right? At bottom 40?
In my mind, it could be split, but it couldn't be split for residential purposes.
Correct. So non-farm splits is that's the key language in the zoning ordinance. And so we don't want to burden the ag community from buying and selling land for ag purposes. But we do want to manage density of non-farm uses. So
okay.
So that's a key language component in density.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Does everybody understand? Because it's very important that option A and B are drastically, I mean, they're similar, but they have drastic differences. And, again, I'll just drive the point home. The number of splits is regulated by math. The more land you have, the more splits you're going to get. But everybody, it's proportionate. If I have 40 acres, I'm going to get 5 splits. If I have 80, I'm going to get double that. I'm going to get 10. We don't care where they go on that contiguous tract. You put them where you want. We'll let you manage that. But we're
Supervisor Bartlett.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand this, of course, but using the picture you just had, with the 10, that you can do the 10 splits in the 80 acres, and then sometime down the road, I'm assuming the people that own this land is on the buildings that we see in the 40 acres. So anyway, somewhere's down the road, those people are gone. And you can split, you just said you could split the 40 acres as agricultural land to 2 20-acre parcels. So now you've got 13 parcels off this 80 acres, and there is a residence on the 1 20-acre parcel. So in theory, you've got residences on 11 parcels, and you've got 13 parcels on the 80 acres. It just seems like as it goes down the road, you end up with a lot more than just 10. I'm just trying to picture this in my mind in this example.
That was an oversight. Actually, what we would do is we would say that, yes, you're exactly right, Chairman Bartlett, that residence there counts as one of the densities. So there would only be 9. There'd be 10 total non-farm uses. So actually we would have to count that one residence as one, and there would only be a total of 10. So there'd be 9 maybe on the upper 40. And
that would be forever, correct? I mean,
it's zoned that way, yes.
Okay. Well, we're talking even in unzoned. If we adopt this, we're talking even in an unzoned, like parcels change hands 50 years down the road. We have totally different people on all the parcels. It still can only have 10 parcels in that 80 acres that are residential, correct? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just to clarify for me, I think that's a good point. I'm glad you caught that. The 40-acre undeveloped property, that would remain part of the home parcel, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So 30 years from now, somebody couldn't come into the office and want to split that 40 because
Right.
it's vacant land. Those splits have already been accounted for.
So if you are a landowner and you think someday you might want to sell that 40 for hunting purposes or something, you would have to have one fewer lot in your development framework.
Hunting is different than residential, but the land.
Oh, well, could you do that
for hunting?
Well,
okay, all right, okay.
We're forgetting you have an option to create an outlot as well. So that vacant, undeveloped area of the woods with steep slopes, somebody could come in and survey that as an outlot and sell that off.
Oh yeah, okay, gotcha.
Or if it's over 20 acres, no survey would be required. They could sell that off as well by, either adequate part of, the whole 40 or all that part of the 40 except those CSM lots. And they would never get a permit to build on there because the residential density is already taken up. But that piece could be sold to a separate party.
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Zoning would regulate, the permits that go in on there to make sure that we don't exceed the density.
Okay.
Tom, one question?
Sure.
On that top 40 that could be sold for hunting land, I thought you couldn't create a parcel that does not have access to the road.
Right, and this isn't, so let's just say I own the land, if I own the land to the west, now we're getting into an adjoining landowner situation, but let's just say I acquire, my good friend owns lot 1 and he's willing to give me an easement across the east 66 feet of his lot. So, and again, this was thrown together in the matter of an hour. It may not accurately reflect, all situations we may encounter. So, but provided this piece had access in some fashion, yes, it could be conveyed to somebody that would never get a permit to build a house on it, though, if the density has already been taken up.
Okay.
And it would only require a survey if it was under 20 acres, because that's how our ordinance allows for that. So.
Okay, the other question, that's
question.
all.
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
That's
Gary.
all outlots, do they have to have access to a public road?
Well, no, I mean, we have outlets that have no access. That's the reason for the designation. There's something inferior, so to speak, about the parcel you're creating. It's either doesn't meet minimum lot size. It maybe has, encumbered by floodplain. It may have wetlands, or it may not have any valid access. And there's reasons outlots are created. And typically there's a note on the map describing what the condition or conditions are that are causing it to be labeled as an outlot. So no, outlots do not need to have access.
But maybe in the future, I mean, we can't go back in the past and correct problems, but in the future, why do you want to create a parcel that won't have a public access to it or like a private access to it? That's something that should be looked at.
Well, typically those parcels that are created by outlot that have no access are typically going to an adjoining landowner. We've seen those created, somebody's got a sewer system over the line and they simply need to create an outlot to get a little piece of land from the neighbor who has a platted lot. And there's no reason to run that outlot for the sewer system way out to the public road, because that's it's certainly not going to help the situation. We just want to clean up an encroachment issue. So those are typically where I see outlots created that don't have access. They're going to an adjoining landowner.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Mike, go ahead.
So let me summarize it and see if I've got it right. This is the way it actually is right now for these zoned townships.
Yes.
As far as the end result. The language might be conflicting, but this is what happens. And if it's a zoned township, they do have a remedy. If they want to put more lots, they can rezone.
Yeah, if we're in a zone township, that's general ag is density based, right?
Okay, yeah, just let me finish just for a second, make sure. Yeah, if it's zoned, it's density based. This is kind of describing that. And if somebody down the road wanted to change it in a zone township, they could ask for a rezone. The real crux is if it's not a zone township, this would be it. They would not have an opportunity to change it at all because there's no zoning. They can't ask for a rezone. Is that correct?
Correct. There would be no mechanism for me as a landowner in the town of New Haven, for instance, to request approval to create more lots. I would be stuck by whatever the calculation turned out to be.
You could persuade your town to adopt zoning.
Yes.
Good luck, but you could.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a good reason to have zoning. You have more
Thank-
flexibility.
Thank you.
What about the variance provision in your ordinance?
Bob, your microphone again.
Variance provision in your ordinance, would that be a mechanism that they could request a variance?
Well, I don't know. I would have to take a look at that, but I don't know that.
I haven't thought about it. I just thought about it just now, so I'm not trying to stump you. I just thought of it, so.
So, this is going to try and move us forward here. So, Tom, you're proposing that we have two options here.
Well, actually, we have three. So let's just go back to the third.
Okay.
The third option would be to do nothing, and just basically. So option C here is no density management, and actually this should say no regulation over time either. So what we could do is maximum density for contiguous tracts subject to county zoning obviously needs to meet the requirements of the comprehensive zoning ordinance. But if you're in an unzoned township, there's no maximum density requirements. So I don't want to say it's a free for all, but you hire a surveyor and you just start doing a series of certified survey maps. You can do up to 4 lots on a certified survey map, and you submit 3 or 4 certified survey maps all at the same time. We have no, 5-year requirement, anything like that. Obviously, they would have to make sure they're not violating the platting statutes and dividing land in a way that would trigger a state plat. So that would have to be monitored, but that would be one option as option C is to just, stick with zoning, or we don't have zoning, not impose any type of standards. So, so those are the 3 options. I don't have any illustrative example of option C, but I think we can all imagine or picture a 40 that could be, carved up by certified survey map all at once without having to wait 5 years between divisions. So,
so does the committee have any thoughts about which of those 3 options is preferable? Mr. Kinnear.
I have a question before we move on.
Okay.
This last C, how would that work, or would it make it more confusing if contiguous land of an owner was on partially zoned and partially unzoned? How does that work? Maybe I can ask Bob that.
Bob Colson, did you hear that comment from Supervisor Kinnear?
Yeah, so if I understand it,
Bob, your microphone.
I'm going to get a different camera or something, this thing, but anyway, I know the solution. So if I understand it, Supervisor Kinnear, it's 140 is zoned and 140 is unzoned, and what happens then? Is that the kind of the question?
Yes.
It would certainly in the zone townships, we would regulate density as we always do, and in the unzoned portion, if depending on which option you choose is how surveying then would regulate the land splits. And so once you cross over the line into a zone townships, it's very clear zoning and density is in play. On the other side, it's going to depend on how the subdivision ordinance is.
So Bob, just let me. You've got. Do you
Go
have
ahead.
if it's 40 in each township? do you have an 80-acre original parcel, or do you have a 40-acre original parcel to base your density on?
In the zone townships, we have a 40 and a 40. They're contiguous, and so we know that in 140 it's 5, and the other 40 it's 5. But you could combine them to put them onto one. But we look at it by parcel, if you want to talk about it, parent tract, and so it would be, you know, what was on the books the day that the ordinance was adopted. That's your parent tract, and then we calculate density according to that. Does that answer your question?
Well, maybe we're getting too fine details, but in the unzoned township, let's just say they put 10. Well, they've used up, even though it's unzoned, they've used up all the parcels for both 40s in a way, if you think of it as contiguous.
Yes.
Any other questions, Mike?
One other question on option C. It says contiguous tracts not subject to county zoning shall have no maximum density requirements. Suppose a township went off on their own and did their own zoning. Would this prohibit them from having a density requirement?
No, I think they would have, obviously, they would have to comply with the more restrictive ordinance requirement. So if we adopted option C and then New Haven came into zoning and allowed for, you know, had a density restriction there, then they would have to comply, obviously, with the town's zoning ordinance, whatever's more restrictive at the time.
So the town can have their own zoning separate from the county.
Yes.
And this would not preclude them from having a density requirement, even though ours says it shall have no maximum density requirement.
Correct.
I'm done. Thank you, Mr.
Supervisor Bartlett.
What do we have right now? I thought I knew, but now I guess I'm questioning myself.
Right now, we have option A.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yep. And that's what we've basically or traditionally had since, you know, March of 06 when our current ordinance was adopted. And even prior to that, we've always allowed 4 lots per 40 in a 5-year period. And this isn't so many people think, well, this is driven by the state. It's a state statutory requirement. And it is not. It's just something Dunn County adopted to try and, I guess, regulate land division, or, you know, at least slow down division by CSM. Obviously, somebody can do a lot more lots right now today if they want. They're going to have to do some type of a plat, a county plat or a state plat. So option A is what we currently have that we're operating under, and that we actually put in our draft ordinance from day one. But again,
and that's in all townships, zoned and non-zoned, correct?
Correct.
So option C is going backwards. Option B is being more restrictive.
More restrictive and in line with our zoning ordinance. So those are the options as I see them. If somebody has another option, we certainly can consider that. But I just, before we get this ordinance codified, I just wanted to make it very clear to the committee that this discussion needs to be had on density. And I apologize if I didn't explain this well enough during our original conversations we've had on this, but I'd rather bring it up here at the 11th hour than bring it up after the ordinance is adopted and attempt to make changes. So now's the time we need to discuss this. It's an important item for consideration. It's a policy decision.
So what you're asking us, if we can, is to give you at this point, maybe we can't at this point, but at this point, if there is one of these options that we prefer, then you will incorporate that into the document and bring it back for us to review again.
Right. Yeah, we may have to make some minor tweaks, maybe some slight modifications to the language, as far as density goes, some things that, we didn't consider. But, obviously we don't want to spend a ton of time finalizing all three of these sections until we get some direction. So these options give you a good framework, I think, of where we want to direction, I guess we want to head. Once that direction has been decided on, then we will firm up one of these three options and bring that back at the next meeting, hopefully.
Tom?
Yes. Gary.
From what I've heard, that option B looks a lot more favorable to me. I think it gives the landowner a lot more options, and I think has a good way to preserve prime land or sensitive land. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
I agree with you. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Mike, you have a
Supervisor
thought?
Kinnear here. Yeah, option A is out. It seems like that's just gone. Option B, I agree with Gary. That's an excellent one. I just the ones the townships that have chosen not to be zoned, it just seems we're giving them zoning in a way. So I'm torn here. Is there an option D that's identical to option C, except that contiguous tracts not subject to county zoning shall, and then just go back to a maximum of 4 tracts per 5 years or something?
Well, and basically that's how option A reads, even though it may not say that, because, again, if we apply option A, they run into a roadblock when they're in, by default, if they're in a zone township, hey, you can't do your 8 lots, you can only do 5 on this 40 because you have to comply with zoning. So we're really back to option A.
So Tom Carlson.
Thank you. That makes it.
Tom, can you hear me? Tom Carlson?
Yes.
What about in the unzoned towns, in order to give them the option of requesting, more density? Is that in the unzoned? What if you allow them to have a plat? Now that gets reviewed, and they could have some additional density. If they go to a platting process rather than just creating it through CSM. I mean, that gives some oversight at the committee level, at least.
Well, I don't know that solves the problem, because now we have a plat that comes in, and what if the committee isn't happy with it? It's, creating a whole bunch of lots in an area that, now we're getting into that, denying a plat, and do we have a valid reason to deny the plat based on X, Y, and Z?
No. I just brought it up as something maybe to look into. I don't know if we can solve it, in 10 minutes here. So
yeah.
Could Gary, would you mind elaborating on what you said? Because you're the farmer and the landowner here. How do you feel about this again, please? Just more clearly.
I think it gives the landowner a more options. If they have an 80 acres like the one presented to us, and there's 40 acres to the south that is typically all farmland, and yet he can still sell the woods to the north at a higher density than what he would on option A. So it's preserving sensitive land and ag land at the same time. He's allowed to use those credits on the upper 40, where it probably is more, it's better placed to develop than on prime ag land or next to the wetland. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I like option B. I'm just trying to look at it from a landowner's standpoint. And now, if you have some land in an unzoned township, this might limit you as far as the number of lots you want. I know my neighbor sells lots because that's how he's retired. So how would that affect you with land you own in an unzoned township? Would that bother you?
It would definitely affect you. If I own this 80 acres and, you know, we'll pick on O'Galley this time, but I own this 80 acres in O'Galley, the most I'm ever going to get there is 10 lots. And if I was planning on creating 24 lots or 18 or, you know, anything over 10, I am not going to be able to do that. And I'm not going to have a mechanism I can't apply for a rezone because I'm in an unzoned township. So,
Gary Bjork, how would you feel about that? I don't know if you have any land in unzoned, but how would you feel about that?
I don't like the word, public good, but maybe that is a good term to use here, like for your surrounding neighbors. If they like the peace and quiet out there, you know, they have some sense of what that land's going to look like 20 years down the road. You know?
I think it's a great point, Gary. Yeah.
It's also worth bringing up that even though that bottom 40 is undeveloped, it's still valuable as to be sold as a large chunk of ag land in the future. So it's the fact that you can't develop it isn't the only revenue stream that's available to the landowner. There's a lot to be said for a large chunk of ag land.
Dave.
I like option B, so I'm not. I think that preserves farmland and it makes sense. But I want to bring up feelings of on-zone townships, and I'm thinking back of a supervisor we used to have, Marv Saxton, that was really outspoken about Springbrook with their decision of being on-zoned because they did not want regulation. And if we go with option B, we are pushing a lot of regulation to an on-zone township. It just seems like option A is what we have now, and that we pushed some regulation to them, but at least that is what we have now, and that's what seems to be working. I just want you to keep in mind that on-zone townships are on-zone for a reason, and that was their decision.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If you went to option C, and that could be some really high density housing, how would you relate to no public access to like a sewer to treat the sewage? I mean, you might be open up a potential environmental challenge for that high density with no regulations to it.
Correct.
I would definitely not be for option C if that's what you thought I meant, Gary. I think we should stick at least with what we have.
But I just think that in what we have now, option B is almost better for the landowner and for the environment. You know, I think it's just a step up from what we're doing right now.
I agree. It is. And it is better. I don't disagree with that. I want us to keep in mind that on-zone townships made that decision for a reason. And their reason was they didn't want regulation. And now we are going to regulate those landowners more. I don't think you would like to be told what you can do with your land if you were in an on-zone township more than what you're being told you can do with it today. We're adding more regulation. I just want us to keep that in mind. I want everybody to think about that.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
both those comments, it's interesting, Gary Bjork, you said it's a step up, and I hadn't thought of it that way. So they could build, with the new language, they could build 10 immediately. With the old language, they could build 8 immediately. Just in kind of the same thing here now. But yeah, so it's a step up. It does change things a little bit for the unzoned townships. You could actually have more the first year, a little bit more. And Dave noticed that, yeah, it's being regulated before, and this would be more regulation. A step up is an interesting way to look at it, Gary.
Well, I mean, in a way, it's more regulation, but it's also giving them more flexibility. They get more. They can develop more quickly, and they can, if they want to protect, they don't have to do it this way, right? I mean, they don't.
I feel I need to make a couple key points here,
Yeah.
okay? And one was Supervisor Quinn, you just made the comment that they don't have to do it this way. That's an important point I want to drive home again. They do not have to do this. If they want, they could put several of those lots, or they could flip this. They could put every one of these down on the other end. And we can't require them to put them in the best areas. But if they are environmentally minded, which a lot of people are, it gives them the opportunity or flexibility. The other thing, I just want to make sure everybody's on board here. And I believe Supervisor Kinnear, you mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said they could do 10 lots right now all at once. That isn't wholly or entirely true, because we're still going to limit them to the 5, number of splits in a 5-year period. So they get 10 splits on this 80 acres, but by certified survey map, they're only allowed 4 splits in a 5-year period. They would have to wait to create the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th lot until, does everybody understand that? By CSM, you're only allowed 4 splits per 40 or 4 splits on that contiguous tract in a 5-year period. If I wanted to do all 10 right now, I could, but that would trigger a plat, either a county plat or a state plat. So in time, they can do 10. They'll never get more than 10. And if they want to do them all at once, they are held to a higher standard, if you will. They're going to be required to do either a county plat or a state plat based on the size of those lots that they're creating. So I hope.
Does that apply to option B? I thought option B gets rid of that.
No.
4 and 8.
No, and we would. I mean, that's something we can negotiate. But right now, if we read right here in blue, so option B, a maximum of 4 lots may be created within that contiguous tract in a 5-year period. So we're still, putting the brakes on, so to speak. Okay, we're going to give you 10 splits, 10 residential splits in this 80-acre contiguous tract. But in order to get all 10 by CSM, it's going to take you some time. We'll let you do 4 and 5, then you can do 4 more. So on year 6, we can end up with 8 lots out there. And on year 11 is when we would max out. Does that make sense?
I noticed when you mentioned that before, Tom, that you were talking about 5, but then the text actually said 4. Would there be any problem with making the text 5?
We could do that. I mean, that's again, this isn't tied to statute or anything.
I mean, if we're trying to cut a balance here between being able to demonstrate there's more.
So given the scenario we have, it would still take them, successive divisions to accomplish this by CSM. It would cut their time down from 11.
But that's true right now too, right?
6. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could certainly put a maximum of 5 lots, maybe created in a 5-year period. Or we can remove that entirely, but then we have no reason, I guess, for somebody to do a county plat or a state. And I guess the whole thought is that if we get a lot of development in one area all at once, we want to have more control over that. We want to see engineered road plans. We want to have, all those requirements that come with the platting process. So I guess we need to keep that in perspective as well.
Well, just to clarify too, so this option B does not require that they do the kind of development you had they could under option B do, if they chose, they'd be foolish probably to do it, but they could do the kind of development that you described in the diagram for option A above. They could do that.
Well, they wouldn't be allowed to because the density would, the density would limit them. Once they hit 10, they're done.
How many lots are in there? Well,
20,
they could,
24.
yeah, so they'd have to do, I see what you're saying, okay.
So question, Tom Carlson?
Yes.
Is the best part of Plan B is the flexibility to put the lots like where you want to and not per 20 per 40 acres? You have to kind of spread them out. Is that the best part of Plan B or that option? That you can kind of concentrate them more than what you could before in Plan A, option A?
Well, I guess the best part for me of option B is we know how many lots we're going to get out there. And if the county or this committee has a philosophy in mind that, we don't want to see more than this amount of density on the residential landscape, this is a perfect way to do it. I mean, it's a finite calculation. I guess that's the benefit I see of this. And then secondary is it allows me to put those lots where I want them to be. I don't know. I feel like I'm not answering your question, Supervisor Bjork, but
You've done a pretty good job.
Well, I'll be honest. It's a very difficult thing to deal with. It really is. But we have to have the discussion, and you can see where it's led already today. It's there's pros and cons to both, and I go back, I guess, to that our comprehensive plan and what is the goal of Dunn. I guess each one of you supervisors needs to ask that question of yourself. What are we trying to accomplish here at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Is it consistent? I guess we need to look at which one of these options is most consistent with our comprehensive plan. Because again, our county land division ordinance is a tool that allows us to implement our comprehensive plan. The plan itself is not an enforcement tool, so to speak, at least the way I understand it. Our ordinances that we adopt are means, or gives us those are the mechanisms that we have in place for implementing our comprehensive plan. So this ordinance is very important. Which option do we feel best implements our comprehensive plan while respecting all stakeholders? And Supervisor Bartlett made some very good comments, I think, that need to be taken into consideration here. So
this is Nick. One of the things I think Supervisor Kinnear had suggested was the possibility of having a hybrid option so that county or towns that are subject to county zoning would have to follow the density specifications that are listed in option B, but that towns that are not subject to county zoning could be subject to the standard that we're currently employing, which is a maximum of 4 lots split off from a 40 within a 5-year period. That's something that we could talk about and try to put. I mean, I don't think it would be too difficult, but it's something that we could talk about and present again at the next meeting, or even just work on it as a possibility if you would direct that. I think I want to say I agree that towns that decide not to have zoning regulations do it for important reasons. This wouldn't subject any town or real estate within a town to any zoning regulation, except to the extent that density is implicated of splits. And so I guess it's not really a zoning imposition. It's still a density imposition. We're just resorting to a parallel provision from the zoning ordinance to regulate how many parcels can be created through certified survey maps. And that's the end of my comment, I guess.
Chairman Quinn?
Yes.
Supervisor Anderson here. Thank you for all this good discussion. I really appreciate what I just heard from Corporation Counsel and from our County Board Chair Bartlett, because I'm one of those that is the neophyte on this committee, and going back and thinking, why do we make these changes? I kind of wondered why we were doing this. So be patient with me. The good discussion, and then I hear from my fellow supervisors Bjork and Kinnear, and I appreciate everything they're saying. So how am I to know? I tend to think that some of us need a little kindergarten, and that's where I'm at on this level. And so I've tried to listen, and I think I'm coming along, but I want all of you to know that I start out like County Board Chair Bartlett said, going back to Supervisor Saxton way back. Well, why do we put regulations on these townships that don't have it? So you're starting to convince me that I should go B, and I can live with that. Are we expected to vote on this today, or
no? Here, thank you, Jim. I think what my thought would be that we need to have time to ruminate on this a little bit. It's okay with the committee. I think, well, I guess, I don't know, Nick, you had a suggestion that we consider an option. Do you think it's worth trying to develop that, or?
Well, I don't think it would take too much work to put it together, and I think Tom could probably do a pretty good, I mean, the maps actually are already in place. It's just that so it would be kind of a hybrid between A and B, which is that zone towns, or actually A and C, I suppose, maximum density for splits by certified survey map, not plat. Splits by certified survey map in zone towns would be subject to the density regulations, and in unzoned towns would continue to be subject to the same maximum of 4 over 5-year period that we currently have and that had been initially proposed. And so essentially the maps that Tom Carlson drafted, the option A map, if you just look at the, one of the 40s, option A would be a zoned town, or an unzoned town, and option B would be a zoned town under that.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, it has the benefit of it is that it doesn't change the standard for unzoned towns that are that's currently in place. So unzoned towns would be subject to the same regulation that they have been for many years with respect to small land divisions through certified survey map. And it would change the regulation for zoned towns to sync up the land division ordinance with the zoning ordinance density regulation. And so, I mean, we could work it up, I think, if you'd like us to.
Well, I think that makes sense. The question is, the question sort of before the committee is, do we want to recommend a change in the end zone township process towards option B, or do we want to maintain the current? That's the difficult question.
Right.
It seems like. And I don't think we're ready to make that decision today. So if it's okay with the committee and staff, could we, I guess maybe I'm wrong. What if you want to do, an informal straw poll to see what if you think, let's just see what the instincts are. Let's just say, if you think that you would like to take a serious consideration of option B as a priority, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So I think we got to come back and talk about it again. We got 3 yes and 2 not ready. Let's just say we need more discussion, and we need to get our heads around this a little better. So we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and Tom and Nick, you can talk, and I can talk to Tom about how to maybe get the discussion further down the road. Is that okay?
Mr. Chair,
yes.
Comment, Mr.
Right.
Chair, that you made, option B, changing the maximum of 4 lots to maximum of 5, might be something to consider next time.
Yep.
Because it would give a bone or a carrot to
Yep.
the non-zone townships.
Yep.
So, great idea.
Good
Okay.
idea.
Anybody else?
Good idea.
All right, then I think I'm glad we caught this. It's really important, and it's going to generate some good discussion here. And remember, we're going to be taking this to a public hearing, and we're going to be asking for input from the towns, and I'm sure we'll get it. I think that's the end of our formal agenda. At our next meeting, so I mentioned Chase won't be starting until after our next meeting. So at the next meeting, we potentially would have a review of the manure management ordinance. Nick, or would you rather wait? I'm fine with waiting on that.
Pardon me?
I'm fine with waiting on that.
Oh, yeah, I have not yet had a chance to crack open the document that Dan Prestbach prepared for me.
Okay. So, and I think it'd be good for Chase to be part of that discussion, since he's going to have to be the manager of it. So we'll go with the next meeting. We'll come back to this, and then we'll do we usually do a sort of review of the matrix on the Water Quality Task Force tasks. Usually Dan Prestbach manages that, but Tom and I have talked a little bit about trying to get enough information on that we could at least have a review of it by the committee and an update on whatever has happened. So we'll try to include that in the agenda next meeting. Anything else anybody wants?
I just want to give the committee a heads up, not for the January 26th, but just as you're planning your meetings, that on February 9, I will be having a public hearing to correct a mapping error in the zoning ordinance. So and I'll remind you again at your next January meeting, just so that you don't overload your February agenda.
Okay. All right, then thanks everybody for your patience and good thoughts. Really good discussion. And the meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks.